The first invoice hit their inbox at 8:02 a.m. By 8:07, Briargate Mutual stopped calling me retired. They started calling me essential. 31 days earlier, Cynthia Blake had smiled across a conference table and called my medical retirement a healthy transition. That was corporate language for get out before you become inconvenient. Now her name flashed across my phone for the 9th time that morning. I let it ring. I was sitting in a cardiac rehab clinic outside Columbus, Ohio. The coffee tasted like warm cardboard. The wall clock ticked louder than the treadmill beside me. My discharge papers sat under a blue folder marked Briargate Separation Agreement. On top of it was an email from their general counsel. Subject line, urgent litigation hold failure. That got my attention. Not because I missed the job. Not because I felt sorry for them. Because a litigation hold is not a suggestion. It is the line between a defensible claim file and a courtroom nightmare. The claim involved Marlowe Distribution, a burned warehouse in Indiana. Policy limit, $18 million. Mortgage exposure, 3 commercial lenders. Suspected inventory inflation, unverified contractor invoices, and 1 missing fraud referral. I had flagged the file 2 weeks before they pushed me out. Cynthia had marked it standard property loss. Her dashboard had agreed. The dashboard was wrong. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Patricia Monroe from legal. Patricia never called twice unless something expensive had broken. I opened her email instead. Harvey, we need immediate help preserving the Marlowe file. Plaintiff counsel is threatening sanctions. Please advise. I took 1 slow sip of coffee. Then I looked at the separation agreement Cynthia had signed without reading. Page 7. Emergency consulting support. Outside specialist rate. Written requests only. 10-hour minimum during active litigation exposure. Cynthia thought that clause was harmless. She thought retirement meant I would answer friendly questions for free. She thought institutional knowledge came with unlimited customer service. That was her first mistake. Her second mistake was firing the only person who knew which claims were dangerous. My name is Harvey Vance. I am 58 years old. I spent 31 years in commercial insurance claims. 17 of those years were at Briargate Mutual. I was not the guy who sold policies. I was not the guy reading scripts from a claims center. I was the guy they called when a file smelled wrong. Warehouse fires. Inflated invoices. Contractor fraud. Lender-placed coverage disputes. Bad faith exposure. The files nobody wanted touched. For years, my job was simple. Keep Briargate from paying fraudulent claims. Keep honest customers protected. Keep legal from walking into discovery blindfolded. That kind of work does not trend on LinkedIn. It does not look pretty in a transformation deck. But it saves companies from bleeding money in silence. So when Cynthia forced me out, I did not yell. I did not threaten anyone. I documented everything. And if you have ever watched a company confuse kindness with weakness, stay with me. Because 1 month after they pushed me into medical retirement, every call they made became billable. And by the time Briargate understood that, the total was already $180,000. I learned claims work from people who still used paper maps and landline phones. They taught me one rule before anything else. A claim file is never just a file. It is a story told by invoices, dates, signatures, photos, statements, and silence. Most people only read what is inside the folder. I learned to read what should have been there, but was not. That skill kept Briargate safe for 17 years. Before Briargate, I handled regional loss review for a carrier in Cincinnati. Before that, I was a junior adjuster driving 400 miles a week. I inspected frozen pipes, roof collapses, kitchen fires, and flooded machine shops. I learned which contractors padded labor hours. I learned which public adjusters copied estimates between unrelated losses. I learned when a claimant was scared, confused, honest, or coached. Nobody teaches that in onboarding. You earn it through mistakes you never forget. At Briargate, my official title was Senior Claims Risk Manager. The real title was harder to fit on a badge. I was the last stop before expensive mistakes became permanent. If a commercial property claim crossed $2 million, it hit my desk. If outside counsel saw bad faith exposure, I got looped in. If special investigation needed a clean referral, I reviewed the packet first. My work lived between insurance and litigation. That meant litigation hold notices had to go out fast. It meant privilege review had to happen before emails left the building. One missed hold could poison a defense. One careless attachment could waive protection. One rushed settlement memo could turn suspicion into a payout. I had seen all three happen at other companies. I promised myself Briargate would not become one of them. That promise cost me nights, weekends, birthdays, and one anniversary dinner. My wife, Elaine, stopped asking when I would be home by 7. She knew the answer was probably after midnight. She also knew why I stayed. A clean claim decision matters. Pay the honest people quickly. Fight the fraudulent ones carefully. Document both like a judge will read it later. That was my religion. Cynthia Blake did not understand that. To her, claims were workflow units. Files were inventory. Adjusters were headcount. Risk judgment was a bottleneck with gray hair. She wanted dashboards, color codes, and offshore summaries. I wanted signed statements, chain of custody, and reserve notes that made sense. Those two worlds were never going to get along. 6 months before my last day, my cardiologist told me to slow down. Not stop. Slow down. I brought Briargate a transition plan the next morning. It had weekly training blocks, open claim reviews, and escalation tables. I even built a binder for Logan Pierce. He was new, nervous, and not stupid. He just needed time. Cynthia looked at my plan for 12 seconds. Then she slid it back across the table. She said 6 months was not agile. I looked at her manicure, then at the claims list. There were 43 high-value files open that quarter. 11 had active counsel. 6 had suspicious loss indicators. 3 had mortgage complications. 1 had all 3. That one was Marlowe Distribution. I tapped the name with my pen and asked if she understood the exposure. Cynthia smiled like I was explaining paper clips. She said the future could not be held hostage by one man. For most of my career, Briargate treated my work like plumbing. Nobody noticed it unless something backed up. When claims closed cleanly, executives called it strong leadership. When fraud got stopped early, finance called it favorable loss development. When outside counsel avoided sanctions, legal called it disciplined case management. My name rarely made the slide deck. That was fine with me. I never needed applause from people who thought reserves balanced themselves. But I did need them to respect the process. Every Tuesday morning, I reviewed the high-value queue before sunrise. I looked at new losses, reserve jumps, vendor changes, lender notices, and attorney letters. Then I marked each file with one of 3 colors. Green meant normal. Yellow meant slow down. Red meant nobody touches this without legal review. The red binder protocol started as a joke after a bad storm season. A junior adjuster asked how I kept catching strange claims. I told him the suspicious ones all sang off key. He asked me to write that down. So I did, but with less poetry. The binder had 38 triggers by the time Cynthia arrived. Late policy endorsements. Duplicate vendor invoices. Public adjuster patterns. Inventory lists without purchase history. Mortgage clauses added near renewal. Contractor estimates with identical language. Photos missing metadata. Witness statements that sounded rehearsed. None of it proved fraud by itself. That was the part young managers never understood. A trigger is not an accusation. It is a reason to slow down and verify. That distinction saved Briargate millions. It also saved honest policyholders from being treated unfairly. Good claims work is not about saying no. It is about knowing when yes requires proof. I trained adjusters to document without drama. I trained supervisors to avoid emotional emails. I trained managers never to joke about claimants in writing. Because discovery loves jokes. Opposing counsel loves sarcasm. Regulators love sloppy shortcuts dressed as efficiency. Cynthia called that fear-based thinking. She preferred frictionless claims handling. That phrase made my neck tighten every time. Friction is not always the enemy. Sometimes friction is the guardrail. Briargate learned that in 2018 during the Ellison textile claim. A warehouse claimed $5 million in damaged fabric. The photos looked clean. The invoices looked cleaner. Cynthia would have paid it in 10 days. My binder flagged one vendor address. It matched a closed business 3 counties away. Special investigation found inflated inventory and recycled paperwork. Briargate paid the legitimate damage and denied the fake portion. Savings, $3.7 million. Nobody remembered that story by 2024. They remembered Cynthia promising shorter cycle times. They remembered her slides showing reduced salary expense. They remembered my medical restrictions like they were a budget opportunity. What they forgot was simple. The binder was not magic. The software was not the shield. I was the person connecting the patterns. Without that judgment, Briargate was not modernized. It was blind at higher speed. Cynthia Blake arrived at Briargate on a Monday with a title nobody needed. Vice President of Claims Transformation sounded impressive in the elevator. On the claims floor, it meant meetings got longer and decisions got thinner. She had a white blazer, a silver laptop, and the permanent smile of someone already promoted in her head. Her first all-hands meeting started at 9 sharp. She stood beside the screen while we sat under fluorescent lights. The deck behind her said modernizing claims through artificial intelligence-driven efficiency. I noticed the word efficiency appeared 14 times. The word accuracy appeared twice. The word liability did not appear at all. That told me plenty. Cynthia spoke like every sentence had been polished by consultants. She said we had to eliminate friction. She said experience was valuable, but not scalable. She said the company needed predictable decision architecture. I wrote those words in my notebook. Not because they were smart. Because dangerous people often announce themselves in polished language. Then she clicked to a slide with my workflow on it. The red binder protocol had been turned into 6 cheerful boxes. Intake, review, score, route, resolve, learn. It looked like a children's menu for commercial claims. The room stayed quiet. Adjusters stared at their shoes. Supervisors stared at the screen. Logan Pierce sat 3 rows back, trying not to look terrified. Cynthia smiled at him like she had found her proof of concept. Logan represents the next generation of claims leadership, she said. Fresh perspective. Digital fluency. No legacy dependency. Legacy dependency landed exactly where she aimed it. People shifted in their chairs. Nobody looked at me. I kept my pen still. In my line of work, silence is better than giving someone a usable quote. Cynthia continued walking the room through her plan. High-value claims would move through automated triage. Offshore reviewers would summarize documentation overnight. Logan would handle escalation with management support. My role would become advisory until medical transition was complete. She said medical transition like she was handing me a gift. I raised my hand once. Cynthia looked surprised, then generous. I asked who would approve reserve increases above $2 million. She said authority routing would be system-generated. I asked who would issue litigation hold notices. She said legal would receive automated alerts. I asked who would decide special investigation referrals. She said the model would identify suspicious patterns. Then I asked which model had reviewed the Marlowe distribution file. Her smile tightened by half an inch. She said Marlowe was not the focus of today's meeting. That was when I knew she had not read it. Not the mortgage endorsements. Not the contractor invoices. Not the public adjuster history. Not the attorney letter hiding in the claim notes. Cynthia thought she was replacing a sick old man with a cleaner process. She did not understand she had just put a first-year apprentice between the company and a file built like a trap. And Marlowe was only the first one. The real betrayal happened 13 days later. Not during Cynthia's presentation. Not during the awkward hallway smiles after it. Those were warning lights. The actual hit came inside conference room 4 at 3:30 p.m. Human Resources had placed a water bottle at my seat. That was how I knew the meeting was not friendly. Friendly meetings had coffee. Termination meetings had water. Cynthia sat on one side of the table. Next to her was Dennis Lowe from Human Resources. Across from them sat a young associate counsel named Reed Palmer. Reed looked barely old enough to rent a car without extra fees. He also looked nervous. That meant he had read at least some paperwork. Dennis opened a folder and used his careful funeral voice. Harvey, we want to support your health journey. I looked at the folder. Medical retirement transition package. Cynthia watched my face, waiting for anger. I gave her nothing. Dennis continued. After reviewing operational needs and workplace wellness considerations, Briargate has decided to accelerate your transition. Accelerate. That was a soft word for removing 6 months from a 6-month plan. I asked when they expected my last day. Dennis looked at Cynthia. Cynthia answered before he could. End of business next Friday. 8 days. She said it like a project milestone. I asked who would take over high-value authority. Cynthia folded her hands. Logan will coordinate with the new claims architecture. I looked at Reed. He looked down at his legal pad. That told me enough. I asked who would handle active litigation holds. Cynthia said legal had automation support. I asked who would approve special investigation referrals. She said the model would flag exceptions. I asked who had documented authority on files above $2 million. Cynthia finally stopped smiling. Harvey, she said, most of what you do is judgment-based. That is exactly what we need to remove from the process. There it was. Not concern, not health, not compassion. They did not think I was recovering. They thought I was obsolete with a doctor's note. The room went quiet enough to hear the air conditioner click. I nodded once and opened the folder. The package offered 12 weeks of salary, continued health coverage, and courtesy transition support. That phrase was buried on page 6. I pointed at it. Define courtesy. Dennis blinked. Cynthia frowned. Reed cleared his throat. I said any support after my final day needed written scope. I said anything involving litigation, reserve authority, or fraud review required paid consulting terms. Cynthia leaned back. Harvey, we are talking about occasional questions. I looked at her signature line waiting on page 8. Then put that in writing. Reed did not like that. Cynthia did not notice. 10 minutes later, she signed the amendment. Outside specialist rate. Written requests only. Minimum billing during active litigation exposure. She signed every page without reading the second paragraph. I signed last. My hand stayed steady. By the time I walked out, Cynthia thought she had retired a problem. What she had really done was convert every future mistake into an invoice. My last Friday at Briargate felt quieter than it should have. No cake. No speech. No awkward card passed around by people signing too fast. Just the soft hum of printers and Cynthia pretending not to watch my office. I arrived at 6:40 a.m. with one cardboard box. I left the framed awards on the wall until noon. Not because they mattered, because removing them too early would make people nervous. Nervous people ask questions. I needed clean records, not drama. First, I finished the transition memo. Final transition summary and high-value claims authority. I attached the open claim inventory. 43 files. 11 with active counsel. 6 with fraud indicators. 3 with mortgage complications. 1 with all 3. Marlowe distribution sat at the top in red. I listed every pending litigation hold. I listed every special investigation referral. I listed every reserve exception above $2 million. I listed every outside counsel contact by matter number. Then I wrote the sentence that mattered most. As of 5 p.m. today, I no longer hold settlement authority, reserve approval authority, or fraud referral authority for Briargate Mutual. I read it twice. Then I copied Patricia Monroe, Cynthia Blake, Dennis Lowe, the Chief Financial Officer, and Claims Operations. I sent it at 4:17 p.m. Delivery receipt confirmed at 4:18. Cynthia never replied. That was her style. Silence when paperwork mattered. Noise when credit was available. At 4:30, Logan Pierce came to my door holding a yellow notepad. Poor kid looked like someone had handed him a cockpit manual mid-flight. He asked if I had 5 minutes. I gave him 20. Not because Briargate deserved it. Because Logan had not betrayed me. He had been placed inside a machine he did not understand. I walked him through the red binder labels. Green, yellow, red. He wrote everything down. His hand shook on Marlowe. I told him to send that file to legal first thing Monday. He asked if Cynthia knew. I said Cynthia knew enough to be responsible. At 4:55, I shut down my computer. At 4:57, I turned in my badge. At 5 o'clock, I was no longer their authority for anything. The next morning, my phone rang at 9:11. I was eating oatmeal at my kitchen table. Elaine looked at the screen and raised one eyebrow. It was Logan. I let it go to voicemail. He needed a reservation of rights template. 9 minutes later, Cynthia texted. Quick question. I did not answer. At 9:34, I sent one email. Please route all post-employment support requests through the consulting process attached to my separation agreement. By Monday, there were 7 requests. By Wednesday, 14. By Friday, 26. They needed template letters, vendor history, reserve logic, counsel contacts, and fraud referral thresholds. Each one came with a claim number. Each one came after my authority ended. I opened a spreadsheet called Assistance Ledger. Date, time, sender, file, issue, billing category. Every entry was boring, precise, and devastating. I did not chase them. I did not remind them. I just documented the help they kept asking for after deciding they no longer needed me. By the 3rd week, the requests stopped sounding routine. The first messages had been small things. Template letters. Old vendor contacts. Where to find authority notes. Then the tone changed. Logan stopped asking like a student. Cynthia started asking like a person hiding a fire behind a closed door. The Marlowe file had moved from annoying to dangerous. A public adjuster was demanding payment on $18 million in claimed inventory loss. 3 lenders wanted written confirmation of mortgage priority. Outside counsel wanted proof Briargate had preserved evidence. Special investigation wanted to know why nobody had received my original referral. That last one mattered most. I had flagged Marlowe 23 days before my final day. The referral packet sat in the claims system, complete and time-stamped. I had marked it pending management approval because Cynthia changed the approval chain. She wanted all special investigation referrals reviewed through her transformation team. Efficient, she called it. Centralized, she called it. In reality, she built a waiting room for problems. Marlowe sat there until plaintiff counsel noticed the delay. By then, Briargate had 2 bad choices. Pay a suspicious claim fast and look careless. Fight the claim late and look disorganized. Neither option looked good in court. Patricia Monroe emailed me on day 22. She kept her message clean and lawyerly. Harvey, confirming whether you previously identified Marlowe for special investigation review. Please advise under consulting process. I forwarded the request into my ledger. Then I answered with the claim number, date, and exact referral location. 10 minutes later, Patricia asked for supporting context. That moved the work from general assistance to litigation support. Different billing category. Higher risk. Higher rate. I updated the spreadsheet. Cynthia called me twice that afternoon. I did not answer. Then she wrote the sentence I had been waiting for. We need your help before this becomes a larger exposure. Larger exposure. That was the first honest thing she had written in months. Because Marlowe was not just about one warehouse. The file touched reinsurance reporting, lender notification, reserve adequacy, and claim handling continuity. If Briargate mishandled it, one bad file could become a regulatory question. A regulatory question could become an audit. An audit could open every high-value claim Cynthia had routed through her new system. I had seen that happen before. Regulators never stop at the first loose thread. They pull until the whole sweater changes shape. That evening, Logan sent me a short email from his personal phone. He apologized. He said he had warned Cynthia the file felt wrong. He said she told him to trust the dashboard. I felt bad for him. Not enough to work for free, but enough to answer through the proper channel. I told legal the Marlowe claim needed immediate hold confirmation, vendor verification, and special investigation review. I also told them no one should discuss coverage by text. 10 minutes later, Cynthia texted coverage thoughts to 5 people. She copied me by accident. I stared at the message, then saved it as a PDF. The invoice was no longer the real problem. Their paper trail was. The next morning, I sent Patricia one document. Not a speech, not a complaint, not an emotional letter about loyalty. Just a professional engagement packet with 3 clean sections. The first section was an emergency consulting agreement. My rate was $650 per hour. Active litigation support carried a 10-hour daily minimum. Weekend review carried a multiplier. Direct coordination with outside counsel required written scope. No phone advice. No hallway favors. No friendly questions through Cynthia. The second section was my retroactive assistance ledger. 63 support requests across 29 days. Each entry had a timestamp, sender, claim number, issue, response, and billing category. The small requests looked harmless alone. Together, they looked like operational dependence. The third section was my conflict protection clause. I would not accept responsibility for decisions made after my authority ended. I would not cure missed deadlines without written acknowledgement. I would not be used as invisible cleanup for visible management failure. Patricia read it before lunch. Cynthia called it unreasonable at 12:14. I knew because Logan forwarded the meeting invite by mistake. Subject line, Harvey invoice containment. That was not smart. At 12:31, Patricia replied to everyone. The requests are documented. The agreement was signed. Do not characterize this as containment. I printed that email and placed it in the folder. Elaine watched from the kitchen doorway. She asked if I enjoyed this. I told her no. Enjoyment was too messy. This was accounting. At 1:06, the chief financial officer joined the thread. He asked whether the invoice could be negotiated down. Patricia answered with 12 words. Not if we expect him to assist under privilege today. That ended the discount conversation. By 2 o'clock, Briargate had a different problem. Outside counsel found Cynthia's accidental text about coverage strategy. She had copied operations, claims, legal, Logan, and me. The message was casual, careless, and exactly the kind of thing lawyers hate. It suggested denying Marlowe first, then finding support later. That was not claim strategy. That was discovery trouble wearing business casual. Patricia called me through the proper consulting channel at 2:18. I accepted the request in writing. Then I reviewed the Marlowe timeline for counsel. The file was worse than I expected. The hold notice went out late. The vendor invoices were never verified. The public adjuster had 2 prior special investigation referrals. The mortgage endorsements were added 11 days before the fire. Cynthia's dashboard had missed every signal. By 4:45, Patricia stopped asking whether they needed me. She asked how fast I could stabilize the file. I sent one answer. Payment authorization first. Written scope second. Claim access third. Cynthia sent another text 6 minutes later. Please just help us fix this. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I forwarded it to Patricia. At 5:22, the board scheduled an emergency call. Cynthia thought the meeting was about my invoice. She had no idea Patricia had already prepared the slide that would end her argument. The emergency board call started at 5:30. I was not on video. I was on audio only, through Patricia's line, under written consulting scope. That mattered. Boundaries matter when people rewrite history for survival. Cynthia opened with confidence she had not earned. She said my invoice was opportunistic. She said I had created unnecessary dependency. She said the team only needed minor clarification during transition. Patricia let her talk for 4 minutes. Then she shared her screen. The first slide was my 6-month transition plan. Dates, training blocks, claim reviews, escalation tables. Cynthia's rejection email sat beside it. Her own words were highlighted. Too slow for transformation goals. The second slide was my final authority memo. 43 files. 11 with counsel. 6 with fraud indicators. 3 with mortgage complications. Marlowe marked red at the top. The third slide was the assistance ledger. 63 requests in 29 days. Cynthia went quiet. The chief financial officer asked one question. Why did we contact him 63 times if he was no longer critical? Nobody answered. Then Patricia opened the clause Cynthia had signed. Outside specialist rate. Written requests only. Minimum billing during active litigation exposure. The board chair asked if the amount was enforceable. Patricia said yes. Then she added the part that changed the room. Fighting it could expose worse documents in discovery. That was when Cynthia finally understood. The invoice was not the danger. The record was. The board approved payment before 6 o'clock. Not because they liked me. Because the litigation clock was louder than pride. I received claim access at 6:22. By 7:10, I had rebuilt the Marlowe timeline. By 8:05, Patricia had a corrected hold notice. By 9:30, special investigation had the referral package. By noon the next day, vendor verification found duplicated invoices. By Friday, outside counsel had enough support to slow the claim without looking reckless. Briargate did not collapse. That was never my goal. Honest employees still worked there. Honest policyholders still needed claims handled. Revenge is cleaner when it does not hit the wrong people. Cynthia was removed from Claims Authority the following Monday. Her new title was Strategic Enablement Advisor. In corporate language, that meant far from anything with legal exposure. Logan called me 2 weeks later through official channels. He said thank you for not letting him take the blame. I told him to read every file like a judge was already watching. He said he would. I believed him. As for me, I kept my rehab appointments. I worked 12 hours a week under contract. No emergencies without scope. No calls without billing. No favors disguised as loyalty. On my last invoice, I added one line in the description field. Experience is expensive. Neglect is worse. Patricia paid it without comment. Cynthia never contacted me again. That was the closest thing to an apology I expected. Sometimes karma does not arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives as a PDF, a timestamp, and a signature someone should have read.